Lechi lach to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha to a place you do not know.
Thank you very much, Ilana. Toda rabba. So I'll already share screen. I'll introduce myself like this. My name is Braun. As you can tell from my American accent, I was born in the U.S., in Chicago, made Aliyah to Israel when I was a little kid back in 1983, which means I'm coming up soon on 40 years living in Israel. I've been involved in guiding and in formal education for over 20 years at this point. Live in Jerusalem with my wife Diklan, 5-month-old baby Hallel. We might hear a bit in the background. But yalla, as we say in Hebrew slang Arabic, let's get going. Let me just put this way, see only my face, will make it easy. We're going to be running roughly an hour through the poetry of Israel's War of Independence. As I always say, and also Ilana was talking about with me before, you're welcome to write your questions in the chat. And what I'll do in the middle is I'm going to take a bit of a break and open it up for questions. Happy to answer. I'll stop share at that point. And then after I'll reshare and we'll go to the end, at which I'll open up again to questions, to ask all your questions. And also from the chat, we'll go over it and the mic will be yours. Okay, let's get going. What we're going to be talking about today is poetry in the Independence War. And where are we going to be traveling to today in order to talk about this poetry, and what time, what era are we going to be talking about exactly? So first of all, geography. First of all, the areas. What we can see over here is a aerial photo, thank you Google Maps, of the land of Israel. And the 3 or 4 places we're going to be touching via poetry is this place over here, first of all, called Gvulot, which if no one has heard of it, that would make sense. You ask 100 Israelis where Gvulot is, and I think about 90 will go, Gvulot, what, where? It's in the western Negev desert. We're going to be talking about that a little bit. And then from there, we're going to make our way to what's called the Lamed Hey, the area leading up to Gush Etzion, which is in Harei Yehuda, the Judean hills. We'll talk about the story of the 35, the Lamed Hey. Then we'll take a bit of a break. And then we'll go talk about 2 tours that are 2 songs or poems that are connected to the road to Jerusalem. Okay, if Jerusalem is somewhere up over here, we're going to be talking about the area of Latrun in general, and the road to Jerusalem and the battles that take place leading up to there, and how it played out via poetry. That's the geography. The era that we're going to be talking about is going to be the Independence War. The Independence War, I like to split it into 2 sections, okay? The first part, the first half of the Independence War is more of a civil war that'll take place between the local Arab population and the local Jewish residents that are going to be in the land of Israel. That'll be from November until really May of 1947-48. And then the second half of the Independence War, after the British leave and Israel declares independence, is an all-out war of the 5 Arab countries surrounding what will be then not just the land of Israel, but now the state of Israel. They're going to attack the state of Israel. I'm giving you this historical background because when we go and talk about these battles and this poetry, it's very important that they have a historical context. So I'm giving a bit of background right now. We'll be running through as we're going through the poetry, and then we'll sum up again at the end. Who are the 2 poets that we are going to be talking about and experiencing their poems today? Both of them are very, very famous poets in modern-day Israel. We have Nathan Alterman, who was born in 1910 in Warsaw, Poland, made Aliyah, migrated to Israel in 1925, and he wrote a lot of his poetry, not just, but a lot of it in a newspaper called Hadavar. He was the night editor, and he had what's called in Hebrew Hatur Hashvi'i, the 7th column, because it was 7th from the side on a particular page in the newspaper. And the 2 poems that we're going to be experiencing together with him today are very famous poems called The Silver Platter and The Trailblazer's Words. The other poet who are going to be exploring his poetry today is going to be Chaim Guri. He's what's called in Hebrew a Sabra, meaning a born and bred Israeli, born in Israel. 1923, he lived a very long, prosperous, and wonderful life, passed away only a couple of years ago. And we are going to be talking about his poems called Babel Wad and Behold Our bodies, both of them written during, of course, the Independence War. I want to jump straight in. And I want to jump straight in before I give background for this poem, because I'm going to read a part of it, and then we're going to go into the history leading up to it, and then we're going to go back into this poem and delve in more. Now, what I want to do in this poem, the first one that we're going to be talking about, it's called The Silver Platter, that was written by Nathan Alterman, is I want to read the very beginning and the very end. And without explaining too much, I'm going to ask you, don't need to answer, I'm going to ask the question out in the air. When do you think this poem was written? At the beginning, the middle, or the end of the Independence War? Okay, and that's going to be our beginning to our sort of virtual tour lecture today. And it goes like this. I'm just going to be reading the golden words that are over here at the beginning and at the end, and you're welcome to read with me from your home too. And it goes like this. And the land will grow still, crimson skies dimming, misting, slowly paling again over smoking frontiers, as the nation stands up, torn at heart but existing, to receive its unique wonder in 2,000 years. Okay, now let's jump to the end, right over here. Then a nation in tears and amazed at this matter will ask, "Who are you?" And the two will then say with the soft voice, "We are the silver platter on which the Jews' state was presented today." Then they fall back in darkness as the day's nation looks on, and the rest can be found in the history books. Now, if I ask you right now, in your opinion, was this poem written at the beginning, the middle, or the end of the Independence War? Most people usually answer, well, it's written at the end of the Independence War. It sort of makes sense from the words that we just read inside of this poem, but it wasn't. This is a prophetic poem that was written by Nathan Alterman at the very beginning of the Independence War. What are the events that are going to lead him to write a prophetic and what turns into a iconic poem? One of the two most famous poems coming out of the Independence War. What are the events that are going to lead him to write this poem, to have the guts to write this poem at the beginning of the war? To answer that, just a bit of history, again, just to put things into context, very famous historical event will take place on November the 29th, 1947. What is that event? That event will be the United Nations partition vote. In the partition plan, the United Nations votes to partition the land of Israel. I'm saying the land of Israel, not the state of Israel, because it's not the state of Israel yet. The British are still here. They've been here for 30 years. They're only going to be leaving in a few months from now. In May of 1948, still the land of Israel. The United Nations will vote to split the land into two. The blue area over here is going to be the new Jewish state, and this brownish area is going to be the new Arab state. And if these borders look foreign to you, you're like, wait a minute, but I don't know them. They never came into play. You're right, because they never did. It was an offer by the United Nations. It was a vote that passed the United Nations, but these borders never came into actuality. Now, the following day, on November the 30th, what's going to happen is the civil war will begin, which is going to involve mostly local Arabs and Arab irregulars that came from outside the land of Israel attacking Jews on the roads, convoys, vehicles, and what will also start leading up to Nathan Alterman writing his poem. We're going to now go through a period of 10, 11 days between December the 9th, when this event that we're going to talk about in a moment happens, and to when Nathan Alterman's poem is going to be published in the newspaper Hadavar 10 days later on December the 19th. What happened? So what we have is like this. If you take a look at the map on the bottom right corner over here, what we're going to see is a map of the western Negev desert. Just to put it a little bit into perspective, we can see the coast of the Mediterranean Sea over here. This is the Gaza Strip today. We're not getting to geopolitics today. Just pointing that out to explain the map a little bit. What will happen are these two people that we can see in the picture over here, by the name of Asaf Shachnai and Miriam Shachor, are part of a group of 9 young Palmach soldiers. Palmach are the lightning strike force unit that took place, that were Jewish fighters in the land of Israel at the time. There's a group of these 9 young, like 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, led by Asaf Shachnai. He was the commander, whose job was to do a patrol from Gvulot, this teeny little Jewish town in the western Negev desert, to Nirim. All right, there's water pipes leading along the way, and they're supposed to patrol it to make sure that the Arabs don't attack it. They make a navigational mistake, and they walk into the Arab town that's called Sho'ut. When they walk inside, they were ambushed, and of the 9 that go into there, 6 will be killed. Amongst them, Asaf Shachnai and Miriam Shachol. That is going to take place on Tuesday, December 9th. Now, what will happen is on Friday, okay, December 12th, 5 of the 6 are going to be buried together in Tel Aviv. And the descriptions are of many, many thousands of Tel Aviv residents coming to the funeral to pay their respects to those who were killed. And amongst the people who will apparently go to this funeral is going to be Nathan Alterman. No one was there to say, yes, he was there, Nathan Alterman was there, but everybody went. And he was a known figure. So he apparently, of course, also was there. And he, like everybody else over there, listened to Miriam Shachol's father, who stood up and gave a eulogy for all of those who were killed. And let's listen to the words of Miriam Shachol's father. This is what he says, okay? And this is going to be 3 days, Friday, December 12th, after these horrible events will happen. It goes like this. A shudder ran through the huge gathering when the teacher, Miriam Shachol's father, stood up to deliver his eulogy in all of the bereaved parents' names. He says, I am not here to eulogize, nor to shed tears, he had said. I come to encourage. I call upon the youth to enroll and fill up the ranks. My beloved Miriam was privileged to fall as a hero on the holy soil and to sanctify the soil of the Negev desert. When the parents are privileged to know we have raised sons who knew how to protect their homeland, the people of Israel will rise and build its state. I emphasize the people of Israel will rise and build its state because Nathan Alterman hears this, and we're going to hear this sentence ringing in his poem in a few moments. The following day on Sabbath, Shabbat, December the 13th, Chaim Weizmann, who had previously been the head of the World Zionist Organization and is later going to be the first president of the state of Israel from 1949 till he passes in 1952, he's going to stand up, not in the state that's on the top of December 15th, but he's going to stand up on Shabbat, December the 13th, in the United States, in a UJA meeting. And it was a fundraiser mission that he was on, and he says, he gives a whole speech. Now, his speech is going to show up in the New York Times a couple days later, on December the 15th, and in it, he says the following. He says, no state has been handed to us on a silver platter, and that only the opportunity to build a state has been created by the nations of the world. He's basically saying, look, the United Nations gave us an opportunity to create a state, but it's not being given to us on a silver platter. Nathan Alterman will read this. A few days later, December 19th, Friday, he will write his song, The Silver Platter. He will take the words from the speech of Chaim Weizmann, and he's going to, the motivation for it is going to come from the event where these young kids were killed in the Negev desert. And now saying that, only barely 3 weeks into the independence war, we're at the beginning. This war, they don't know at that time how it's going to evolve and how long it's going to last. But this war is going to be a long war. And they do realize that they're only at the beginning. And Nathan Alterman will have the courage and the guts to write a prophetic poem, which is going to turn into one of the iconic poems of Israel. And now let us delve a little bit more in depth as we read the poem in its entirety. All right. Here we go. And the land will grow still, crimson skies dimming, misting. I emphasize, and the land will grow still because this is a biblical context. I emphasize some of the biblical context over here that Nathan Alterman is going to use in his poem. If you open up the book of Judges, all right, in the Tanakh, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, inside the book, again, it's repetitive, and there was peace, and then there were battles, and then Israel was occupied by other Canaanite rulers, and then they fought back, and then there was quiet, and it'll say, V'ha'aretz tishkot, and the land will grow still, will grow quiet. That's where Nathan Alterman takes us from. So, let me just do a little here, pointer options will make it easier now. I can have it all the time. And the land will grow still, crimson skies dimming, misting, slowly paling again over smoking frontiers, as the nation stands up, torn at heart but existing, to receive its unique wander in 2,000 years. Unique wander because this is a nation that is returning after staying next year in Jerusalem for 2,000 years, spread out all around the world, and remaining with this common denominator, this will to come back, is a unique wander. As the moment draws near, it will rise, moon facing. Why moon facing? Because in Judaism, the day will always start the night before, okay? When we're talking about a particular date in Judaism, it starts the night before. We say the eve of. The Sabbath will start on the eve of, not on the Sabbath morning, but on Friday night. As the moment draws near, it will rise moon facing, standing straight in the moonlight in terror and joy. When across from it step out towards it slowly pacing, in plain sight of all, a young girl and a boy. This is Miriam Shachor and Asaf Shachnai that we were talking about before. This is the young girl and boy that Nathan Alterman is talking about. But they're basically representing everyone that fell in the Independence War. They've come straight from battle, dressed in battle gear, dirty, shoes heavy with grime. On the path they will climb up, while their lips remain sealed. To change garb to white brow they have not yet found time, still bone weary from days and nights in the field. Full of endless fatigue and all drained of emotion, yet the dew of their youth is still seen on their head. Thus like statues they stand stiff and still with no motion, and no sign that will show if they live or are dead. Then a nation in tears and amazed at this matter will ask, who are you? And this is taken from the book of Bereshit, from Genesis, when Isaac is confused with his two sons, Jacob and Esav. Say, who are you? Which one are you? Who are you? And the two will then say with soft voice, we are the silver platter on which the Jews' state was presented today. Then they fall back in darkness as the day's nation looks on, and the rest can be found in the history books. Okay, Nathan Alterman is prophesizing what it'll be at the end of the independence war. He's basically saying, right at the beginning, it's going to be very, very difficult, but we will prevail. And from the silver platter of Nathan Alterman, what we're going to do now is we are now going to move up, and we're going to move forward from December of 1947 to January of 1948. What's going to happen in January of 1948? In January of 1948, I'm excited to put it into the map. I'm thinking back when I created this presentation several months ago, I probably also should have put them on my map, but I'll show with my pointer. This is Jerusalem, okay, up in the Judean hills. And right south of Jerusalem, we have an area, a geographical area that I'm pointing to right now with my red pointer called Gush Etzion. It's a geographical name of an area that's south of Jerusalem, also in the Judean hills. But they're under siege. They're surrounded by Arab towns. A group of Lamed Hey. Lamed Hey means 35. It's the numerical value, okay, of 35 in Hebrew letters Lamed Hey. They're going to make their way up to Gush Etzion over here to bring the besieged Gush Etzion ammunition. This is a very famous event within Israeli history. And let's take a look at a map over here to talk a little bit about where we're at, all right? To give you a bit of context, this map, like almost all maps, will be facing towards the north on top, meaning that if this map was bigger on the right side to the east, we'd see Jerusalem. If it was bigger on the left to the west side, we'd reach Tel Aviv and the Mediterranean Sea, all right? Where are we starting from over here? We're starting from over here. Where is our destination? Okay, our destination is going to be over here. This is Gush Etzion. They don't make it. All of them will be killed over here. Now, what's the story a little bit more in depth? A group of 38 at the beginning, not 35, young men in their young 20s, late teens, are going to head out a little bit after 11 p.m. on January the 15th, 1948, to make their way from a place called Nacham, not far from Beit Shemesh, if you know Israel a little bit, to walk through the night around Arab villages. They want to make sure that they're not going to be seen by them. And the idea is that they make their way up to this area over here called Gush Etzion. Okay? Now, Gush Etzion I already mentioned, is under siege from Arab towns over here. And the idea is to get to there before sunrise. They're going to head out 38. One of the guys is going to sprain his ankle along the way. He's going to turn back with two of his friends to help drag him back, and their lives are saved. The 35 will continue, and they're going to walk. And for whatever reasons that we'll never quite know for sure, they didn't make it before sunrise. By about 5:45, 6 a.m., we know that hour of the day, it's already a little bit light. Okay, my 5-month-old daughter knows very well at 6 a.m. that it is morning. We're all awake, shining and dancing with her. But 6 a.m., it's already light. And what will happen is the 35 fighters are going to have two guys that are up ahead, scouts. And the scouts are going to be seen by a couple women that are going to come out of this Arab town here that's called Tsurif. They're going to see one another. The women will turn around and run back into the town. The two scouts figure, right, no big deal. We're on our way. We'll be fine. But they were wrong, because there was basically what happened was there was a group of Arab fighters that were inside over there. The women come in, say what they saw, and these Arab fighters are going to come out. And what they're going to do is they're going to shove and push the 35 fighters up to this hill that's over here. And that's the picture that we can see on this right side over here. And it's on this hill throughout the day of January the 16th, 1948, that the 35 fighters will fight literally, really literally to the last bullet. And they're going to all be killed on this hill that's over here. Arabs will later describe that the last Jewish fighters over there were seen literally with stones in their hands fighting until the very end. And let's use Google Earth. I like to, a lot of times on my tours is use Google Earth, but since this is a little bit more of a presentation than a virtual tour, so this will be the only point that I'm using Google Earth on this particular tour. We're now standing on top of this hill, which is today called in Hebrew Givat HaKrav, the battle hill. And we can turn around and just get a feel of the topography of the area. These are it's a very hilly area of the Judean hills. All right. The direction that we're looking at over here, and here I can't use a red laser because it's in Google Earth, so I'll just use my blue mouse. We're looking east. This is the mountain ridge, the Judean Hills mountain ridge, and it's this area that they needed to get to, Gush Etzion. Of course, they didn't make it. We're going to continue twisting and turning. We can see this monument over here that was built in their memory. This is all metal over here, and there's 35 rocks over here that's in their memory. You can hike up to the top over there, and that's just to get a bit of a feel of the place, and they're all killed. Chaim Guri is going to be a Palmach fighter. All the 35 that were killed are Palmach fighters, lightning strike force fighters. And Chaim Guri also is a Palmach fighter, but he at that time is on a mission in going between Vienna and Budapest to help Holocaust survivors make their way to the land of Israel. And Chaim Guri the following day is going to see the newspaper headlines. He's going to get reports from his friends and from his friends that are with him is in Europe at the time. And he realizes that some of the people that were killed were some of his personal friends. And he's going to sit down spontaneously, and he's going to write this poem that's called Behold Our Bodies. And it says to Danny and his friends, because the head of the Lamed Hey of the mission was a good friend of his name was Danny Mas. And when Chaim Guri sits down to write this poem, he'll write it. He's very upset. And after he writes it, he goes, nah, it's not good. He rolls it up into a ball, throws it into the fireplace, and leaves it. Now, thankfully, it missed the fireplace. And the housekeeper that was in the house sees it. This piece of paper rolled up. She comes and she opens it up. She knows Hebrew. She sees what's written. She puts it on the table. And next to it, she writes to Chaim Guri, Tachshov Shuv, think again. Chaim Guri comes, he reads it again, he says, okay, maybe I won't throw it into the fireplace. And what does it say in this poem? Let's read it. It says like this. The first part is going to talk about the loss of beauty of Israel. And what Chaim Guri is doing, he's entering the bodies of the 35 who were killed, and it's as if he's talking from them. And he says like this, behold, our bodies are laid out in a long, long line. Our faces have altered. Death looks from our eyes. We do not breathe. The last rays of daylight, evening glides down the hill. Behold, we shall not rise to walk the roads by the light of the far sunset. We shall not love, not pluck the strings with delicate whispered sounds, not shout in the gardens when the wind stirs through the wood. So that'll be the first paragraph. Now in the second paragraph, he's going to write about concern to the mourning families. Behold, our mothers are bowed and silent, our friends choking with tears. Bursts of grenades nearby, firing in signs presaging storm. Will you bury us now? Lo, we shall arise and press forward again as of old and return to life. We shall march, formidable, resolved to bring aid, for all still is within us and floods our veins. Now, when we continue to the third paragraph, we'll talk about this new Jewish fighter, okay, the glorifying of the Jewish fighter that was very much a part of the Israeli ethos. Also today, but back then, that much more, because it was also in contrast to what they saw as the Yehudi Galuti, the Jew in the diaspora at the time. Again, we're talking 1948. We're talking about these new waves of immigrants that a lot of them had left their families behind during the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth wave of immigrations, sort of like the Jew of the shtetl they saw it. And they said, we're not that kind of Jew anymore. We're now this proud, fighting, heroic Jew. And that'll lead us into the third paragraph, which goes like this. There was no betrayal. Our guns are still strapped to us, empty of bullets, because they'd shot them to the very end. They tell of our fight till the end. Their barrels are still aflame. And our blood splattered the path with every step we took. We did all we could till our last man fell and lay still. Are we guilty if we were left dead at eventide, with our lips pressed to the hard, rocky ground? And we'll continue on now. Behold how wide and spacious is the night, how the stars blossom in the dark. Sweet smell the pines. Now you shall bury us with clods of earth on our faces. Basically, the rocks on the earth that they were left with literally in their hands, they were fighting to the end. Where the barbed wire is nailed in ditches, here all of us together. At the beginning, they were actually brought to Gush Etzion to be buried in one of the small Jewish town strongholds that were there at the time. And they were buried together. And later on, when it was under Jordanian rule in 1950, they were brought over to the Israeli side, and they were buried on Mount Herzl, Israel's main military cemetery, where you can visit their graves until today. A new day, forget not, for we upheld your name till death closed our eyes. And of course, there's always the hope that in the future will bring good and positive things, and they shall come back to life again. And that will be our last paragraph, which goes, behold, our bodies are laid in a long, long line. We do not breathe. But the wind is now on the hills. The wind breathes. Morning breaks, and the shining dew sings. We shall return again. We shall meet. We shall return as scarlet flowers. On Soldiers' Memorial Day, Soldiers and Victims of Terror Memorial Day, we walk around with the sticker with the red flower. It's called in Hebrew Dam HaMaccabim. In English, it's called the red everlasting flower. And that's a picture of the flower that I put in the top right corner. And that's the scarlet flower over here. You will know us at once, our Silent Mountain platoon. That's them. Then we shall blossom. Then when the last shot has been silenced in the hills. So I'll stop over here for a bit of a break. We'll do a stop share. We'll take a bit of a breather, and I'll take a drink. Get a drink of water. And if you have any questions, comments, or remarks as we take this bit of the break, you're more than welcome to ask, and then we'll continue. And of course, at the end, I'll open it up for questions.
I don't see any questions yet. I do see we have a special guest here. Before I'll ask people to unmute with questions. She says, hello, everybody from Dubai. I don't have enough Wi-Fi right now to join with camera or even stay longer, but she and Corona Malka are looking forward to seeing you Thursday. So Julia's here with us in some form for a little bit of time. So hi to Julia. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to unmute to ask Ami.
Were these poems recognized and when they were first written as being something special, or did this come later?
No, absolutely. These were already from the beginning seen very much as iconic poems, and that started to shape Israeli culture already then. I'll tell you what, we'll even one of them, the next one, Bab El Wad, which that along with the silver platter are probably two of the most famous. We'll already hear a beautiful rendition of it by Yafa Koni that she sang in 1949, right after the Independence War. All right, I'll continue.
There's one question.
Yes.
Well, you did, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And you did answer part of my question with Bab El Wad, which is this heart-rending song and poem. But were any of the others that you've mentioned put into music?
They're put into music, but they're not songs that really you hear. It's not something that, it's not like Bab El Wad, which is very famous. Bab El Wad very much caught on, put into music. The others were, but there is no familiarity really to it. It's not something that you really hear at all.
That's a shame, I guess.
You're right. I don't know why it played out that way, but yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll continue on. I shall reshare the screen. Here we go. And let me move, you can't see this, but I can. I have to move my little spacebar to the bottom. And there we go. The next poem, 3 out of 4 that we're going to be talking about, will really take us to the story of the road to Jerusalem. The issues and the main problems on the road to Jerusalem, I wrote here January to April 1948. It really is January to June of 1948, but it depends where. But this specific section that we're looking at right now is January to April 1948. What happens is in January of 1948, there's going to be one of the Arab leaders whose name is Harun ben Jazi, is going to walk around on these Judean hills over here. And why is he going to be walking around over here? Because what we have is this valley. Now, this valley is going to start from Sha'ar Hagai, the gate to the valley, which is also known as Bab El Wad in Arabic, meaning the gate to the valley. And this valley will go all the way through, snake its way through these mountains and make their way all the way up to the top of the mountain range, and that is where Jerusalem is located. Inside Jerusalem at the time, we have 100,000 Jews that will be living, and that is a full 1/6 of the population of 600,000 strong regarding Jews for living in the land of Israel when the Independence War broke out. This road that means that this road will connect 1/6 of the Jewish population with the rest of the country. There were other roads, but they were not passable at all because of the many Arab towns that were in the area. This road over here was the only option. The Arabs realized this, and Harun ben Jazi is going to walk around on these hills over here, and he's going to learn every stone, every area where he can lead ambushes on caravans of vehicles that will be making their way with food, mostly food, also ammunition, mostly food, to what will be a starving Jerusalem. And if we go, what I want to do is I want to introduce you to this area over here. The next video was taking place, I took it with my wife back in the summer. When you drive, if you remember on previous visits to Israel, when you drive by Sha'ar Hagai, and suddenly, if you're going towards Jerusalem, the topography goes from flat and open suddenly into a narrow valley. If you look on the right side of the road, and then later on the left side of the road, you'll see these vehicles that are actually over here behind me right now, which are from the caravans of vehicles that made their way to Jerusalem through hell. And I'm going to put on a short video of myself right now talking over there, and then we'll talk about the events leading up on this road over here. Just a second, let me just move the space bar again. And welcome, Tommy, Israel Guide. You know the vehicles that you see on the side of the #1 highway when we're on our way to Jerusalem? So we went a little off-road, and here we are right now, right next to them. I can almost hear with my ears the sounds of the young men and women that were inside these vehicles fighting their way up to Jerusalem. Now, from the sides of the hills, there was a faza by the Arab irregulars who are making their way down, and more often than not, these vehicles got stuck, and unfortunately, a lot of the men and women inside were killed. And here we are, paying our respects to them. A faza means a full-out attack, a blitz. Well, we could see, don't think of the multi-lane #1 highway, very comfortable to driving that we have today. I want you to take a look at this road over here, okay? Very narrow, and these vehicles that we see on the side of the road today are going to start making their way through this valley. This is a picture from the top of the hill showing you the topographical advantage that anybody on these hills will have from above, or the topographical disadvantage that anybody will have as they're going through these roads. And the young men and women, fighters, these are kids that are 17, 18, 19 years old. Yeah, they're fighters and they're kids. They would get into vehicles. They would come with caravans of dozens of vehicles. And they describe how, as they would make their way out from the general Tel Aviv area, they would sing. They were so stressed and because of and nervous of what was coming, they would sing. And that was to try and help with the tension. And when they would arrive at Sha'ar Hagai, they would describe suddenly everything went silent in the vehicles, and then the bullets started to ring out. These vehicles have like double metal sides with the wooden panel in the middle. On top, it was like a cage that was supposed to protect them from hand grenades that were thrown at them. And as they're making their way through at the beginning, the Arabs would put roadblocks, like we can see over here, to stop the vehicles. So then the Jewish fighters would, in the front vehicle, they'd have a vehicle that have like, tractor in the front with the big tow, whatever you want to call it, that can move these roadblocks to the side. So the Arabs would put mines inside of them, booby traps to explode, and it created a tremendous amount of havoc. And at a certain point, by the end of March, the caravans couldn't even make their way through anymore. And Jerusalem was officially under siege until a couple of weeks later was opened via other battles, such as the Castel. Beni Maharshak was what we call in Hebrew Bashak Tabu. He was like the cultural attaché, the cultural person within the Palmach, and he described the importance of this road in a sentence. He simply wrote, "Show me a people, show me a state whose width of their state is the width of a road." That sentence says it all. Chaim Guri, at the end of the Independence War, is going to write the following poem. He will come back from Europe to fight in Israel during the Independence War. He will not fight along this road. He will fight in the Negev desert. And at the end of the war, he's going to write this poem regarding the battles that we were just talking about. And I'll read it. We'll go a little bit depth into it. And then we'll listen to it being sung in 1949 by Raphael Koni with pictures of the actual road. But we have yet to get to that. He goes like this. Here I am passing, standing by the stone, an asphalt road, rocks and ridges. Day goes down slowly, sea wind blows. Light of a first star over Beit Machsir. Beit Machsir was one of the Arab towns from which the Arabs came out of Tetech, the Jews. And then we get to the chorus, Bab el Wad. Bab el Wad in Arabic again means the gate to the valley. Bab means door, Wad from Wadi, the gate to the door to the Wadi, to the valley. Bab el Wad, do remember our names forever. Our names forever meaning everybody's names, everybody who's fallen. There's no unknown soldiers, although we will get to that in a minute, but even the soldiers, we don't know their names because they're Holocaust survivors with no families. We remember them. Remember our names forever. Convoys broke through on the way to the city. I should have written the city in capital letters, okay? It doesn't say convoys broke through on the way to Jerusalem. To the city. Everybody knows what the city is. Of course it's Jerusalem. Convoys broke through on the way to the city. Our dead lie on the road edges. The iron skeleton is silent, like my comrade. The iron skeleton, of course, are the vehicles on the side of the road. Here pitch and lead fumed under the sun. Here nights passed with fire and knives. Here sorrow and glory lived together with the burnt armored car and the name of an unknown. Unknown at the end of the day are Holocaust survivors who came. No one knows their name. They came without family and they were killed. And I am walking by, passing here silently, and I remember them one by one. Here we fought together on cliffs and boulders. Here we were one family. A spring day will come, the cyclamens will bloom, red of anemone on the mountain and on the slope. He who will go on the road we went, he will not forget us, Bab el Wad. Chaim Guri writes this at the end of the Independence War. He's already saying at this point, he realizes that these vehicles that we see today, okay, in 2021, will remain on the side of the road. I'll tell you a very powerful story that I experienced as a tour guide several years ago. I guided a family, multi-generation, grandparents, kids, and grandchildren, all of them first-timers besides a grandmother who'd been here for a previous time in 1952. Okay, we're talking, I mean, it must have come somewhere around 2017, 2018. 1952 was the last time she was here. They land at the airport. We get in the vehicle on the bus. We're making our way to Jerusalem. And as usual, I point out these vehicles on the side of the road. And she says to me, Ami, you should know, I haven't been here since 1952. I remember these vehicles, side of the road, same place as if it was yesterday. Let's listen to Yafa Yelkoni singing the song, okay? And as we listen to her, we'll also, look, the song's in Hebrew, all right? And even if you don't understand the words, you get the feeling of the song. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, just to the first part, but we're going to see pictures from then and get a real view of what the road looked like back then.
אני עובר, ניצב ליד האבן, כביש אספלט שחור, סלעים ורכסים, ערב ואת יורד, רוח ים נושבת, אור כוכב ראשון, מעבר בית מחסים. בבלוואן, לנצח זכור נא את שמותינו, שיירות פרצו בדרך אל העיר, בצידי הדרך מוטלים מתינו, שלד הברזל שותק כמו ראי. בבלוואן,
We'll stop here because that's really we had the first paragraph and we heard the chorus of the song being sung, and again the rendition that we heard is sung by Yafa Yelkoni. It's really the first time that the song was sung. I remember you asked me to remember your name. I apologize if it already then became famous. 1949. Yes, it did. The last song that we're going to be talking about is, again, this generally the same area of the road, Latun, to be more exact. Let's go to this map over here that will help us out a little bit. To put things into historical context once again. Up till now, okay, or in the previous poem, we were talking about this section, leading from Sha'ar Hagai, the gate to the valley, up. This is the #1 highway today, up through the mountains, up to Jerusalem. After the months of January through March, which were so difficult for the convoys making their way up to Jerusalem, by the end of March, the convoys couldn't make their way up anymore. There was an operation that was David Ben Gurion was the mastermind behind it, where 1,500 Palmaf soldiers went out and simply captured the Arab towns that were on the hills over here, and that opened the road to Jerusalem. And at this point, from Sha'ar Hagai to Jerusalem, the road is more or less open. But now we're going to jump forward to May of 1948. On the 14th of May, 1948, Israel declares, independence. And why am I saying this? Because up to now is a civil war. Now it won't be anymore because the British will leave the following day on May the 15th. And amongst the 5 different countries that will attack Israel, one of them is going to be the Kingdom of Jordan. And they're going to come in and they're going to conquer Latun. Latun was a British stronghold before that. And Latun is also on this road leading to Jerusalem, okay? Because this is the Tel Aviv area down below over here. And you have to go through Latun and Sha'ar Hagai to Jerusalem. So great. This section is now open. But now we have a pkak, as it's called in Hebrew. What's it called when you put in the bathtub to stop the water from flowing? The word's escaping me. A plug. Okay, we have a plug now in the middle of the road. And again, Jerusalem's under siege. You got 100,000 people living there. You need to bring food. What do you do? So, first of all, what does it look like that they need to conquer? It's this. This is a was a big police station built by the British in the late 1930s. They leave it, and this is where the Jordanians are going to be fortifying themselves the year and the hills all around. And there's going to be a unit called Chativa Sheva, the 7th Brigade, that will be created overnight, which is very problematic to begin with, led by a Palmach officer whose name is, not Palmach officer, an officer in the new Israeli army called Shlomo Shamir. And we're now at the end of May 1948. State of Israel is a couple weeks old, and he is going to lead the first attack on Latun on May the 24th. It will fail. He'll lead a second attack onto Latun on May the 30th. It will fail. That's a whole topic in and of itself. We're not going to get into the details of the battle, but they both failed. And in general, 3 attacks in the area, plus people who were killed on the road that we're about to create in a minute. There were 130 deaths on the attacks in the general area to try and open the road. Latun was not captured. It remained in Jordanian hands. We need to get to Jerusalem to open the road to Jerusalem. Jerusalemites from back then will describe they're literally starving at this point, and they were eating the mallow weed. The mallow weeds that were growing, they would cook it, and they would eat it from the ground after cooking it, in order to give them some kind of food. My father-in-law is 84 years old. He has childhood memories from him. He was about 11 from the war in Jerusalem, and he has very difficult stories, which remain very sharp in his mind until today. But one of the stories that he tells us is how they'd eat the mallow weed. And he says that we're in May now. Usually by May, it's sort of dying out, but there was a bit of a late rainstorm, and that helped to grow at that point, and it helped with the food. We need to open the road to Jerusalem. What will happen is there is an area, okay? I'll get back to this video in a minute. What we're going to have is like this. There's going to be a Jeep that'll make its way out of Jerusalem. It'll drive through these mountains over here, and it'll actually make its way all the way through to the area of an army base where Shlomo Shamir and the 7th Brigade are sitting. And this guy's going to say, we need to work on it, but we can create a dirt path to Jerusalem. And people say, Shlomo Shamir said to this person who made his way through, he said, you made it via Jeep, and you're a ridiculously professional driver. How are we going to have trucks that are going to make their way to Jerusalem with all the food that needs to be brought to there? But the decision is made to create a road that will later be called the Burma Road. And the idea is to bypass Latun, and it'll lead to Sha'ar Hagai, to this area that's already open to Jerusalem. And to see it in the geography, in the outside, a little bit of what it looks like, we have this video over here. Oops, just a second. What we're going to do is let me go back for a minute, back to my regular pointer. Why is it not working? Nope, it's not working over here. Just a second. Let me try one more time, and if not, we will give up on this. There's a short video over here. Oh, it's not working. The idea is like this. The idea is you can see the mountains. It's just basically do a 360, so it's no big deal. Basically, what we can see is we can see the hills that are outside of Latun. The picture that I took over here is from the rooftop of Latun, of the structure that we saw before. We're looking out to the hills, and the Burma Road is going to be built in this area that's around over here. Now, the work is going to last for about 11 days from May 30th until about June 10th. We can see also in this picture on the left over here, this is Latun. Here is the red dirt path that was built in order to bypass and make the way to Jerusalem. They're going to take fighters from the 7th Brigade, from the Palmach. They're going to bring volunteers. And just to understand what it looks like, we're going to come back to this video in a minute. Take a look at the path over here. This is after they worked on the path, all right? Take a look at the bedrock. Part of the path over here is this very, very difficult terrain that they actually need to dig into to create a path for trucks to make their way up on this road. What they did is we can see this metal mesh over here that they covered the road with, so that the trucks could they actually made their way down this part of the path, but down and then up other areas over here. During this week and a half that they're working like crazy and people are literally digging with their hands, they also brought mules, 21 mules, to help bring a lot of these sacks of food up on the road to Jerusalem. People literally walk with sacks of 60 kilo and 90 kilo on their backs. I mean, we're talking about 150 pounds, ridiculous amounts on their backs in order to try to make their way up. And there was always the fear that the Jordanians were going to fight against them, shoot at them, and kill them. And the Jordanians did try to stop the work, but in the end, the path was opened and the truck started running through on June the 11th. I'm going to take you to a short video over here of myself. Now, why is this not working over here? I don't know why. This is very weird. What I want to do is I want to go back to my pointer, to my regular pointer. Here, let's go back to arrow options, automatic, and now, nope. Why is this not working? I don't know why. This is very strange. It's always worked till now. Nope. Just a second, bear with me over here. Pointer options, arrow options. I'm trying to do simply go back. Here we go. Thank you very much. Welcome to Ami Israel Guide. I'm now standing on the Burma Road. This is an emergency bypass road that was created during the Independence War in 1948 to bypass the Jordanians who were blocking the road to Jerusalem. And I can just feel the urgency that the people who were working over here at the time were feeling as they were working as hard as they could and as quickly as they could to open this road to Jerusalem so that the city isn't under siege, bringing water, food, and ammunition to Jerusalem. And in the end, the road was opened. These are pictures once the road was opened. And that'll lead us to our last poem by Nathan Alterman called The Trailblazer's Words. Logic ruled in vain. Fear had said, we are doomed. The old accounting of wars spat disdainfully in our faces. British steel and Arab fire yelled, on your knees. And we had just a score of rifles. A score of rifles it's a bit lost in translation, but in Hebrew it says minyan rovim, a minyan, a quorum of 10 people for prayer. We only had a minyan of rifles, a score of rifles, but we broke through the road. Another biblical way of speaking is at the beginning of the next paragraph. From the eastern border, Ammon poured in. Egypt from the south had risen. From north and west with roaring voices, they closed on us the hunting circle. Our feet they had settled. Lord, this is a prayer to heaven. All right, for help. And let me just move my spacebar just a second. There we go. On our bellies, we crawled up the mountain, a fallen brother on our back, but we had passed the road. We succeeded. Crows and vultures high above have seen the birth of a nation, as Hebrew regiments ravaged ceaselessly. Just as at the end of a deep plowing day, they lay now under earth and flowers. They cannot hear no song nor laughter. These are the fighters, the soldiers who didn't survive. Since they lay now under earth and flowers, they cannot hear no song nor laughter, since they have broken through the road. To you, the people, upstanding and alive, they were betrothed with no praise nor crowns. To you, the people, they have gifted these 40 kilometers, these 40 parsings. 40 is a repetitive number a lot of times in the Bible. 40 days of the Mabul, of the flood, etc. So that's why he's using a biblical term of 40 parsings. And to you, the people, they have gifted these 40 kilometers, these 40 parsings, drenched in blood and oil, gray and rocky. But as of now, the road, meaning the Burma road, or in general the road to Jerusalem, the road is open. So I thought that it was most appropriate that now that last week and 2 weeks ago, we had Soldiers Memorial Day, Independence Day, also Holocaust Remembrance Day. This could be quite the appropriate time for this poem. I'll open up to any questions that you want. Of course, here's my email. You're welcome to shoot me an email with any questions, comments, remarks. But in the meantime, I will stop share. Here we go. And if you have questions, comments, remarks, it's in your hands. Sorry for the slight technical mishap at the end.
Thank you so much, Ami. That was amazing. We haven't had any talk like that yet in all of these 80-something talks. Nothing really bringing the arts in, which is so nice to hear poetry and songs and everything. There is one question that is typed into the chat, and then we'll open it up to anyone who has a question and wants to unmute themselves. Harry's asking, how long did Jerusalem go completely without being supplied?
It was totally shut off only for, at the beginning, about 10 days. We're talking about a big convoy of March the 28th, which of the dozens of trucks were trying to make it through, none made it. What happens is on April 7th, the Costa, which you can visit today, it's a national park, it's overlooking the road, was captured and conquered by the Palmach fighters, and that opened the road to Jerusalem. But we need to realize that also before that, even before it was completely shut off, Jerusalem was running very, very low on food and on water because of all the convoys that tried to make it through. Only a particular percentage of the trucks actually made it through. There was a stipend of the amount of food and water that everybody could use every day. So it's not like, they were doing great and then suddenly, they had a week where there was where nobody could enter. And then, everything was good. No, they were very, very low on food and water to begin with. And then again, when Latrun shut the road off, again, we're talking about a period of a few weeks from mid-May, basically when the Jordanians arrived to Latrun on May the 18th, shut the road off, that was it, until the Burma road was open on June 11th. So we're talking there about, about 3 weeks again at that point.
I see one other question I missed before. Ami, can you share a few words about Mickey Marcus?
Yeah, of course. Mickey Marcus. First of all, watch the movie Cast a Giant Shadow with Kirk Douglas. Wonderful movie. Mickey Marcus was an American Jewish officer who basically was recruited, all right, by this brand new Israeli army before it was even an army. When the partition plan passed, at the very beginning of the Independence War, and he was brought to the land of Israel to share his experience and military expertise. And he wrote the first military manual, all right, for the Israeli army. They don't talk about that part in the movie Cast a Giant Shadow. But amongst the different things that Mickey Stone, David Marcus, or Mickey Marcus goes by a variety of names. Amongst the different things that he was involved in was in what we were talking about at the end, and the battles on Latrun, okay, which failed. He was sitting there in the back with Shlomo Shamir that I mentioned and overlooking the battle. And he was there when the Burma road was open. Unfortunately, he was killed by friendly fire because on June 11th, there was the first ceasefire in the Independence War. The Independence War gets a bit complex. There was fighting ceasefires. And the first ceasefire, he was sitting in a place called Abu Gush on the road to Jerusalem where there's an army base. And he walked out at night out of the base, and he tried coming back in. He didn't know Hebrew, and he didn't know the code, the password to enter back in, and he was shot by friendly fire, and he was killed. May his memory be blessed. So that's a few words about Mickey Marcus. Watch Cast a Giant Shadow with Kirk Douglas. It's based on true events, and it gives the atmosphere about him.
Yeah, additional information on him. He was not a combat officer. I believe he was a JAG colonel. In other words, he was a lawyer. And he is buried in West Point. I had visited his grave.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions they want to ask, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I put a question into the chat.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
About tanks.
Yeah. What's the question? Let's see.
Oh, it wasn't a question, so I didn't read it.
The lack of tanks and the importance of first losing Latrun and then capturing it in 1967. There were none when they went to Latrun. So the stories like this regarding tanks. They didn't have tanks to capture Latrun. They had armored personnel carriers. And in the second big attack, the first attack, I made it very simple on Latrun because like any battle or combination of battles, it's complicated since we're talking more about poetry and less about the battles. I didn't really get into what happened over there, but there are actually two attacks. The first attack wasn't on that big fortification itself, but it was on the hills in the area, and that completely failed. The second attack that will take place on May 30th, they didn't have tanks to attack, but they had armored personnel carriers, and they came up with 5 armored personnel carriers right up to over there. One of them managed to make its way through. They had flame shooters. But it failed in the end. They did not succeed. And regarding tanks, the it's actually a pretty fascinating story. Throughout the Independence War, all right, Israel had about 10 tanks that they fought with. Amongst the 10 tanks, 2 of the first ones were stolen literally from under the nose of the British. It was a week or two before the British were leaving. The tanks were situated in the port of Haifa, and the Israelis, knowing that they need tanks in order to fight a war, they turned to 2 British officers, all right, called Flanagan and MacDonald, who they believed would turn against the British, against their own army, and they were right, they did. And they said, we want you to teach us how to drive tanks. We want you to steal 2 tanks and teach us how to drive tanks for our new army. So they sat down in a true story, honest to God, true story. There's a lot of legends. This one is a true story. They sat down in a restaurant with a napkin, and Flanagan and MacDonald on a napkin tried showing these Israelis how to drive a tank. Good luck with that one. So the 2 Israelis hide in the British Army base until they're taken out by the 2 other British officers who are helping them. The 4 of them are going to get into the tank. You think the 2 Israelis managed to drive the tank after learning how to drive it on a napkin? Not really. The first one completely failed, couldn't get the tank going, jumps out and runs off. The second guy actually managed to drive the tank out of the army base, then stalled, and he ran away. But the 2 British officers, and this is the point of the story, do have managed to drive the tanks out. And what they're going to do is they're going to manage to drive them from Haifa to Tel Aviv, because the Israelis made roadblocks along the way. They put vehicles sideways on the highway behind the tanks so that the British couldn't stop them. They hid these 2 tanks. How do you hide tanks? It doesn't matter right now. And this is a story, true story, of these 2 British officers, Flanagan and MacDonald, how they got 2, they were Cromwell tanks, 2 of the original tanks. Israel ended up, by the end, throughout the independence, we're having 10 tanks to their disposal. But in Latun, it was the armored personnel carriers. It was not tanks. What happens in 1967 is they didn't really need anything in the end to conquer Latun. They came all ready and prepared to conquer it with the memory of their failure of conquering 1948. But they when they arrived at this big, scary fortress, they discovered it was empty. The Jordanians had actually left it in 1964 and hadn't gone back in. So there was no fighting involved. They just waltzed in 1967. Just a second. Right. Hold on a second. One second, please. 1 second.
Esther, I see your question.
Sorry. I thought my wife was knocking on the door. There was an emergency. All good. Yes, I'm with you.
Okay. Esther had a question. She's asking if you could please explain the monument, read the Trailblazers' words poem. The song itself or the monument itself? I didn't understand. Esther, could you unmute so you can explain your question? Esther, are you there? She's here. She's not. Esther, can you unmute?
Yeah. Okay. Hello?
Hi. Yes, Esther. How you doing?
Yes. When you were talking about the...
You're mute. Esther, we can't hear you.
I don't know why I keep unmuting.
Oh, there. Now I can.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yeah.
All right. So there was a picture of a monument.
Oh, yeah. That's
so
right.
Can you explain the monument?
Sure.
I didn't understand it.
Here you go. The monument over here on the left, on the right side. Yeah.
On the right side.
Right side. That depends on, yeah, on the right side. I'll start by saying what I usually say about these things. It's art, okay? Meaning it's something that you can translate however you see it. And at the end of the day, though, the way I see it and what I've read about it a little bit is it's pointing up, okay? It's looking up, because when you're fighting on the road to Jerusalem, you're coming from the bottom, okay? The bottom topographically, the coastal plains, the coast. To come up to Jerusalem, you need to come up the Judean hills, all right? You have to come up a mountain, up a hill. You're looking upwards. You're making your way up and you're conquering the mountain. But again, that's an interpretation. It's art, and you can interpret however you want. You can think about what we spoke about today and how you connect to the monument. I hope I answered your question.
Okay.
There's also a question, is there a monument to the 2 tank Brits?
No. There's not one of them. Why? See, here's a problem with COVID. The problem with COVID is I haven't guided in over a year. So usually when I go to there, I tell their story. But when you're not guiding for over a year, and I didn't guide Latun specifically on Zoom. I don't remember the exact details. Rusty tour guides after sitting home for over a year. No, there's no monument in memory of the two. What you can see is one of the tanks. I don't think both you can see one of the two Cromwell tanks. And the story is mentioned like ascendants over there. So if you want to call it a monument, that can be a monument. One of the tanks that they stole is there. One of them, I don't remember, and this is what I don't remember anymore, is it Flanagan and McDonald actually afterwards married an Israeli Jewish fighter and lived in Israel for a while. And eventually after kids, family and everything, and many years later, immigrated to Canada. And not that many years ago, there are many myths of how they stole the tanks and this and that, and I'm not going to tell you all the legendary stories that I heard about it that simply weren't true. The story that I told you is the true story. We know that because not that long ago, he came back, either Flanagan or McDonald, one of the two, to the museum. He stood next to the tank. He told the story. And I'm not sure if he's still alive today, but there's definitely even just a few years ago. And he said, I am very happy that the tank today is in a museum, not fighting. Things should be peaceful.
And how did the British Army treat them?
Look, the British left with they did it like a week or two before the British left. And so it did, I mean, of course they were seen as traitors, but the British were gone, and they were Irish. All right. The one was Irish, the other was Scottish, which is why they didn't mind doing it.
Okay.
I didn't add that detail. So they were like, when the Israelis turned to this, they're like, yeah, no problem. We'll sort of give it to the British Army. But of course they were seen as traitors, but the British were gone within a week or two. It didn't matter anymore.
Alan is commenting on hummus you can get in Abu Ghosh.
Hummus Abu Ghosh. Yes, come already so we can go to Hummus Abu Ghosh. I haven't been there in ages.
Kante hummus, that brand, Abu Ghosh variety.
Yeah. Abu Ghosh is known for its hummus, definitely.
Question about the use of poetry as a mechanism of conversing on memorial events. Is that a common Israeli trait? It just never struck me that way.
Absolutely. The answer is yes. You will. What you'll have a lot of times is you'll have big groups, gather in different places on Leil Yom HaZikaron, on soldiers and victims of terror Memorial Eve, and sort of sing poetry. Or you'll have famous singers that will come, and it'll be a singer per poem, and they'll sing it. And of course, what I read over here is some canonical poetry from the Independence War. You have songs and you have poetry that are also very modern day, and absolutely, you'll sit there and you'll sing it in a very mournful way. There's always the main gathering that's on TV is from Rabin Square in Tel Aviv, where you see it. I went for years to Safra Square in Jerusalem. There's a big square outside the municipality center, and over there you sit and you sing the poems, and it's definitely a central part of Israeli society. Very powerful, yes.
Thank you.
Does anyone?
Did they move the skeletons of the armored trucks? Because I remember being in Israel in the 70s and the 80s. They were different color, and I think they were like some of them in the middle of the road even.
You remember correctly. I was wondering if somebody was going to say something.
Yeah, when did they move them, paint them, and move them?
Very recently, over the last few years. You're right. They used to be a much more rusty color. They painted them just a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, roughly, if I remember correctly. And they moved them because of the massive construction that they did on the #1 highway. You're right. They're located in 2 places. One place hasn't moved. That's not the place that we saw this time. One place hasn't moved. But the other place that moved was what you remember. There was like a big island in the middle of the highway. And they moved them when they were redoing the whole highway, roughly 5 years ago. From that highway, from that island area in the middle, they moved it to the other, more or less to the other side, not that far away. I can't tell you, again, just because they widened the highway a tremendous amount. They had to fix up the highway. It was a horrible highway, and it needed to be reconstructed. I can tell you that I haven't been there yet because it just opened a couple of weeks ago. But right at Sha'ar Hagai, right next to where they repositioned the skeletons, is they opened in what used to be an old hotel. They now opened a museum in memory of the fallen soldiers, and it's interactive, and you can go through there, and it tells their story. It literally opened right before Pesach, and I meant to go, and then I had to cancel, which is what happens when you have a infant in your home. Things you're not in control of your life anymore. But I definitely plan on going, and I encourage you also to go. And that's something new that's open that tells their story.
What's the name of the museum?
Chan Sha'ar Hagai, the Sha'ar Hagai Chan, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it's that, because Chan means hotel, and it used to be a hotel 100 years ago, so it's the Sha'ar Hagai Hotel, if I remember correctly. Yes.
The words in the poems were so evocative. I could see the young men and women working on the road and climbing to Jerusalem. Are there any prose? Is there anything written either in English or in Hebrew that's been translated that I could read that would continue to share the story?
You mean a good book to read about the events over there?
Right.
The best book that I read is called O Jerusalem by Dominique Lapierre and Larry Collins. I see some people are doing like this with their head. Excellent book. I remember it was written in the 60s or the 70s, and it gives it's about everything around Jerusalem and in Jerusalem and the events taking place. So that's O Jerusalem, in my opinion, is the best book to read.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So another question in the chat. Why is it thought that Abu Ghosh was the only Arab village west of Jerusalem that sided with the Zionists?
Abu Ghosh did side very much with the Zionists. The relations were very, very good. You know what? Shoot me. I've read about it. I don't remember the details right now. Shoot me an email, whoever asked that question. I'll put my email in the chat, and I read an interesting article specifically about Abu Ghosh, their history and their connection with the Israelis. Shoot me an email. I'll look up the article and I'll give you an answer. I don't want to give you a half answer right now, and I don't remember the details. So just a second. I don't know why it's not. Ilana, can you do me a favor, please? I don't know why it's writing everything in Hebrew by me right now.
Okay.
That's amibraun@gmail.com. It's very easy. AMIBRAUN@gmail.com.
Ami,
Ami,
we're all familiar with the decline of tourism over the last year and some. I'm just curious how you were able to make it with the family.
Excellent question. I appreciate it. The government saved my life. I'm giving you a straight out answer. What happened was when this hit, the government tour guides, even though we're independent, we were able to, most of us, not all of us without getting into all the details, but most of us, and me included, thank God, were able to collect unemployment. We've been getting unemployment from the beginning all the way through until June, meaning 15 months of unemployment. In addition to that, we get bi-monthly. Bi-monthly means every 2 months in English, right? We get
twice a month.
So the opposite, once every 2 months. Once every 2 months, in addition to unemployment, the government has been giving a chunk of money to people who have been unemployed. I mean, it's not just tour guides, of course, it's everybody that's been unemployed. So the combination of collecting unemployment and every 2 months getting a chunk of money from the government from the beginning, from March, April, all the way through, it's due until June, has basically given my family an economic net that has been able to allow me to breathe throughout this difficult time, thank God. And I can say that, God willing, things should just be okay. You were talking about May 23rd and starting to organize a group coming. That news came out last week, and that May, there's going to be a process of the sky starting to open. And thank God, I almost started crying when I got these text messages, but I started getting text messages and groups for a little bit, even in July and August, when basically that's when all the unemployment apparently will end. And thank God my itinerary is starting to fill up the July and August and beyond even a little bit. So, but the government basically gave the economic, and then beyond that, look, I've been running, Ilana was with me at the beginning when I started running virtual tours back in April, a combination of that, and I've been involved in some local guiding in the old city and with local tourism, which is also added on to what the government gave. So that's the answer to the question.
Thank you. Good luck.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment about what Ami just said. So many of you abroad see things that happen in Israel, and you see all the protests, and which have been going on for a year now, all the massive protests every single week about, you know, the anti-government stuff, and leave it to an American who is appreciative for what the government has done for him and for all the others here in Israel. Yeah. During this whole year. And I think it's very interesting that an American is, can see that the government is really trying to do something. So, I know an awful lot of Israelis that all they do is complain about everything.
No, I can complain. I have the American accent. I've been here since kindergarten.
No, I know.
Yeah, but
but you still have the American
fair enough. Fair enough. In that respect, yes. Without going into politics, which I will not do here, I am in that respect, I'm very appreciative of what the government did, but for me, in that respect, basically saved my family the last year, and many others. To tell you that everybody has benefited that way, no, but many people have. I have, and of course, I'm extremely thankful to the government for that.
Mm-hmm. Great.
There's a question I don't know how to answer. And it's not for Ami necessarily. It's just, are tourists from the US allowed to visit Israel yet?
So the answer is like this. Basically, right now, no, not yet, if you don't have an Israeli passport. What came out last week was a general explanation of what's going to happen. And they said they're going to give more details soon. But in general, the latest news is it was on the Times of Israel. If you want, Ilana, I can send you via email. Remind me if you want to send.
I think a lot of people saw that article.
So it's basically saying on May 23rd, they're going to open the skies for 10 to 20 groups that will come in. In June, they'll widen it to more groups. At the beginning, it's just groups and not individuals. At the beginning of July, it'll also open up to individuals. And what you will need is you need to be vaccinated, and you need to have a COVID test before you come and a serological test upon arrival. Now, saying that, what I just said, there are somewhat amorphic, but the details that I gave to you right now, and I can also assume that a lot of these details will change as we move forward.
And by groups, it doesn't necessarily mean VFI, because I think group is like if everyone's going in the plane together with the tour guide. As you know, or as you might not know, VFI volunteers, we kind of go on our own and get to the airport where we would find someone like Pam.
I think, that's probably part of the amorphic area right now. I mean, honestly, for July, August, what I got is what I haven't guided in years and thought I never would guide again, but it's Birthright. I was retired from guiding Birthright. And not to mention in July, August, which usually is packed with work for me. And when I got 2 bookings for July, August on Birthright, to tell you that I didn't hesitate for a second. I didn't at this point, but those are groups. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't know what the meaning of a group really means yet, but wait a few days and the government will come out, I hope, with specific instructions.
Yeah. Group was not defined in that article.
It wasn't.
Right.
And I know
it's amorphic a little bit, the article.
It's heading in the right direction. We're banking on definitely the fall being a point where the Volunteers for Israel will be sending people. And there's a groundswell of people interested. So
I know a lot of people are saying, oh, if you have family there, you can go. But I'll give an example. As my rabbi and his wife have not been able to get into Israel. They have 8 grandchildren there and 2 children with spouses, and they cannot get in.
Yeah, so, very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Ami, thank you very much for giving
Thank
us
you.
a perspective that we've never had in the prior 87 episodes, and a little bit of literature thrown in on top of that, which is a special treat. And really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us answering questions as well.
Pleasure.
It was wonderful.
Look forward to you having the remainder of a positive year, and maybe our paths will cross.
It'd be wonderful.
We will have our 100th episode on June 3rd, and maybe you can join us.
What's he gonna do?
So,
centennial celebration.
That's it. That's it.
Oh my goodness.
No, I wanted to tell you thank you because I'm not a big poetry fan. So when I saw that this was going to be poetry, I thought, oh, I'm not tuning in. And then, but you know, VFI always ropes me in. So I'm really happy. I
Really
love the poetry and the photos and the history all combined together. It was wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.
A very lucid and explanatory discussion on a range of topics.
Yeah, I know. So it was
poetry and
great.
war would come together so conveniently. Super. Well, what we do now is, unless anybody has further questions, I know it's probably around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock your time.
10:30. How's it good?
We now
Ami probably
break.
doesn't sleep anymore anyway.
Oh no, Halella's been great. She's been sleeping.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm for
she's-
Ami to go to sleep because you have to get up in a few hours.
You
so.
have to bring it to some of the episodes, you know. So what we do now is we go into schmooze mode, which lasts for as long as people want to schmooze and
So
talk on
I'll
topics.
say-
You're
You can
welcome
go
to
to
join us
sleep,
sometime,
Ami.
but
Thank you
All
so
the best.
much, Ami. It was great seeing
Thank
you.
you. It was
You
great.
too. Take care. All the best. Bye bye.
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov. Bye.
It was really, really interesting, wasn't
I
it?
know. I was really glad I tuned in. I thought,
So smart. And he's such a wonderful guide.
He